Pinup Audio presents Found Forever, written by Whitley Cox, performed in dual narration by Andy Eloise and Sean Masters.
For the top-notch finger bang, often overshadowed by other acts, but not one to be ignored. Chapter 1. Decker. The evening was warm for early June. The crickets sung their nightly lullaby, but it was drowned out by the music pumping from the DJ booth. Decker was not one for loud parties or music, not even before his days in the Navy, fighting overseas and getting his eardrums pummeled by gunfire. He liked music, but he liked it at a reasonable decibel, one where he could still hear himself think. A volume moderate enough that if someone cried for help or there was a siren from an ambulance or fire truck, they'd be able to hear it. He sat at one of the tables in the big white tent and watched from his perch as dozens of people, his twin brother Riker included, danced and grinded on the dance floor. They were at the Harris Brothers Ranch in Colorado to celebrate their buddy Nate getting married. Nate and his brother Asher were fellow SEALs, but they retired from active duty a few years ago, deciding that ranch life was more their speed. So now they bred horses, did trail rides, ran a petting farm, and offered horse sporting. Their wives also had their businesses on the property. Triss, Asher's wife, had her therapy clinic where she was a speech pathologist, and Nate's bride, Mika, Triss's sister, had just opened up her dance studio. They had acres and acres of land, so why not? Decker brought the low ball of whiskey to his mouth and took a sip. He hadn't been able to take his eyes off the blonde in the yellow dress all night. She was Joanna, or Joni, Mika's friend from their days dancing on the cruise ships, and she was stunning. Her smile was brighter than the goddamn sun. Her eyes were an interesting blue hazel, and the way she moved her body as she danced with Mika had Decker hypnotized. She caught him looking at her more than once and smiled coyly as she continued to shimmy and shake her hips. Her blonde curls hung down her back, grazing the back of her dress, but it swayed like willow branches on a warm breeze with her beautiful dancing. He could honestly watch her dance all fucking night. Maybe it was the whiskey talking, but he didn't think so. He hadn't said a fucking word to her, though, because he had no idea what to say. He'd arrived yesterday with Riker, and they went out with the rest of the crew to Denver for Nate's bachelor party. It wasn't as wild as Asher's bachelor party, but it was still wild. Asher's party, because Nate had planned it, was kind of crazy, and it had been a joint party with the bachelorettes. But since Asher, who was more reserved and relaxed like Decker, planned Nate's party, things were far more low-key. Which was something most of them appreciated today, since none of them were spring chickens any longer and couldn't binge drink like teenagers, then get up the next day and act like nothing had happened. In his prime, Decker could easily drink 10 or more ounces of vodka in a night, black out, then wake up the next morning and run a marathon. He'd done that at least twice. Not anymore. He was 45 and feeling his age now. It was good to see his friends, though. See his brothers in arms. They'd been so tight when they were all in active duty, working as an elite SEAL team, then Black Ops. Now most of them were married and had families. Aaron Steele has 4 kids. 4! Decker never would have pegged the broody, tattooed redhead for a dad, let alone one to 4 kids. But he looked happier than Decker had ever seen him. Rob Cahill married a billionaire heiress, and they had twin girls. Then Barnes Wark married Rob's wife's sister, also a billionaire heiress. And although they didn't have kids and didn't plan to, they had a fulfilling life in Oregon. Colton Hastings married Aaron's wife's friend after only knowing her for a day. They eloped to Vegas. But years later, they were still happy and had 2 kids. Pete Callahan just found love with Asher and Nate's cousin, Hannah. And then Asher and Nate were finally in love and starting families. Then there was Brendan. Decker's throat grew tight at the memory of their brother. He took his own life shortly after his daughter Sasha was born, leaving his wife Molly and Sasha to pick up the pieces of their shattered hearts. Everyone's heart shattered the day they got the phone call about Brendan. Molly had been invited to the wedding because none of them turned their back on her after Brendan died. They stepped up, and one of them was always there if she needed something. But Sasha had a dance recital, so they had to miss the wedding. That left Decker and Riker as the remaining single men from their brotherhood. Riker played the field like a star quarterback, but Decker preferred commitment. There were just too many head games in the dating world. Too much fakeness. Too much putting on airs. He also didn't like the idea of casual sex. Never had. When he got with a woman, he wanted to take his time, learning every inch of her body. There was no such thing as wham bam thank you ma'am. In his world, he wanted to make sure his partner was satisfied more than once, and that she never felt rushed or left hanging. Even though he and Riker were identical twins and best friends, they couldn't be more different in so many ways, and relationships were one of them. A solid hand landed on his right shoulder and gave a hard, affectionate squeeze. "Two left feet or too drunk?" came Pete Callahan's voice. His name was Pete, but everyone called him Cal. "Never been a dancer," Decker said with a shrug as Cal took a seat beside him at the table. Hannah danced with Triss and Mika, her arms in the air and a big grin stretching from ear to ear. Cal's face brightened when he locked eyes with his woman. She gave him a cheeky, sexy smile, then a wink. "You two met and hooked up over Christmas last year, right?" Decker asked. "When she house and animal sat for Ash and Nate?" Cal nodded. "Yeah. I came over to help, and even though she was stubborn as hell, saying she didn't need my help, eventually she realized that many hands make light work." He snorted. "After that, she was stuck with me." Decker grunted and his head bobbed before he lifted his low ball and took another sip. The smooth whiskey slid down his throat like liquid silk, warming his chest and belly. "How'd you know Hannah was the one?" he asked, keeping his voice low as he tracked Joanna across the dance floor, laughing with Mika. Cal followed Decker's gaze and snickered. "Miss Fernsby is very pretty. You talked to her?" Decker swung his gaze at Cal and glared at his friend. "Answer the question." Cal's lip twitched as he tried to smother his smile. "I just knew. I felt it in here." He knocked a fist lightly against his chest. "I saw her, and I just had this crazy, tingly feeling in my belly and my balls," he snorted. "And I just knew. She didn't make it easy on me, though. I had to work for it." Decker grunted, then found Joanna back on the dance floor. She had a new glass of booze in one hand and her other hand in the air as she swayed, closed her eyes, and sung with her soul to Living on a Prayer. "Now answer my question," Cal said with mirth. "Have you spoken to Joni?" Decker shook his head stiffly. "No." "Well, you should. She's very nice, very loud," he chuckled, "and swears like a British sailor, because she is British." Hannah wandered over, her cheeks rosy and amber eyes bright. She swung herself into Cal's lap and looped her arm around his shoulder. "Hey, lover." Cal rested his hand on her thigh, chuckling. "Well, hello there. What's a fine ginger piece of ass like you sitting in the corner for? Don't you know nobody puts baby in the corner?" She swiveled around to beam at Decker. "You want to come dance too?" "I'll pass," Decker said. "Thanks." Hannah shrugged and bounced out of Cal's lap, grabbing his hand and pulling him to stand. Her dark curls jostled as she started to wiggle in time to the music, tucking her man out to the dance floor with her. "You're missing out!" Cal hollered over the bass just before the rhythm possessed him, and he wrapped an arm around Hannah and the two started to dance. Deck brought his low ball to his lips, but frowned when he realized it was empty. With a groan and a sigh, he pried himself out of the chair. A few things creaked and cracked in his back, and his knee did an annoying twinge thing. It was his body's way of reminding him that he was not a spry, green, behind-the-gills 20-year-old anymore with a rubber body and endless stamina. He'd also put his body through the fucking ringer for the last 20-odd years, and he was finally catching up on him. Joe Blow off the street would have died 1,000 times over if he'd done some of the shit Decker and his brothers had done. He made his way over to the bar. "Whiskey. Neat," he grunted to the bartender. The bartender nodded and poured him a double. He'd been drinking doubles all night, so the guy didn't even have to ask. He took his glass and stuffed $5 into the tip jar. It was an open bar, but that didn't mean he couldn't thank the man in the black dress shirt for his speedy service. Turning around, he leaned back against the bar and took a sip. He wasn't a big drinker, but when he did drink, he drank good stuff. Good beer, good whiskey, good scotch, good bourbon. There was no Wild Turkey or Bud Light touching his lips. Never. He wasn't a snob, or maybe he was, but he knew what he liked, and since he didn't drink very often, why waste the moment on the cheap swill that he used to drink like water when he was a teenager? He was 45 years old. Life was precious. Too precious to spend choking back the fermented monkey piss they sold for peanuts in the liquor store. He snagged his brother's gaze across the tent. Decker's twin was busy chatting it up with a couple of Mika's other cruise ship dancer friends. Riker's smile was telling. He was probably going to take one, or both, of the dancers back to his room in the bunkhouse. Lovely. Decker shared a wall with Riker, and his brother was loud. The Harris brothers had built a big bunkhouse over the last year for their ranch hands, but they still had a few vacant rooms available for guests. Some of the guests were staying in the main house with Mika and Nate, while others were in Triss and Asher's new house on the other side of the field. Then there were some RVs parked in the fields and ATVs for people to take to cabins in the woods. The bride and groom wanted to make sure that all their guests had places to stay, and since the ranch was in the middle of farm country, hotels and motels were miles away. Some guests, like Barnes and his wife, Aaron and his brood, and Rob and his brood, opted to drive out with RVs, which they parked on the field far enough away that they wouldn't be disturbed by music. Then Nate and Mika rented a few more RVs for other guests who were traveling from far away. It wasn't a big wedding, but it felt big, given the energy of the guests and how much love filled the tent. It was second nature to scan the area of danger. You could take the seal out of the field, but you couldn't keep him from being a seal. In fact, Decker noticed all of his brothers scanning the tent and field for anything nefarious more than once. Even though they were all relaxed and enjoying themselves, they were still aware of their surroundings and on high alert. Not that there was really anything to worry about all the way out in the field in the middle of rural Colorado, but he could never be too complacent. His eyes were on the darkness that was endless through the gap in the tent flaps when a breathless huff and a waft of something sweet with just a tang of sweat drifted toward him. He glanced to the right, and his throat grew tight. It was Joanna. "A water, please," she said to the bartender before shaking her head to get her light curls off her face. The bartender nodded and poured her a glass from the pitcher. She chugged it, so fast that several drops landed on her chest and slid down into her cleavage. Decker, like the red-blooded man that he was, couldn't look away. He envied those water droplets. She let out a satisfied, "ah," then placed the glass on the bar top. "One more, please." The bartender filled her up. "Thanks, love," she said, grabbing the full glass again and chugging it. More water fell onto her chest and slid below the neckline of her dress. She turned to Decker, her smile brilliant and beautiful. "Which twin are you again?" His lip twitched. "Decker." "Right, the serious one." His brows barely lifted. "Who told you that?" "Mika. She said hot twin seals were coming to the wedding. One was a party animal, and one was serious, stern, and broody. I should have known, though, since your brother is probably going to be spending the night with Melissa and Jillian, and he's been dancing like mad on the dance floor. Meanwhile, you've been sitting in your chair with your whiskey, silently judging everyone." "Is that what I've been doing?" he asked, the corner of his mouth tugging up. She lifted one slender shoulder. "Isn't it?" "Maybe I'm just watching people. No judgment. Maybe I just don't like dancing." "Everyone likes dancing, even if they're rubbish at it. It's fun and it's great exercise." "That's a bold blanket statement. Everyone likes dancing. Really." She lobbed a mock pout, but then cheeky determination flashed in her eyes, and she grinned as she reached for his hand. "Come on. You'll have fun, I swear." Sucking in a deep breath through his nose, he rolled his eyes, finished his drink, and set it on the bar, allowing the pretty blonde to lug him onto the floor. Just as they hit the parquet wood, The song changed to something slow. Several people left the floor, but a few new people joined. Couples mostly, swaying close and gazing into each other's eyes. Rayma, Mika's youngest sister and the wildest, swayed with her oldest sister, Pasha. Her head rested on Pasha's chest. Her eyes were closed and she had a goofy, drunk smile on her face. Pasha's husband, a big blonde behemoth of a man named Heath, snickered off to the side, cradling a low ball of something amber in his hand as he chatted with his brother-in-law, Rayma's husband, Jordan. Decker had always been good at names and faces. It was part of his job, remembering people, remembering threats. "Come here, Mr. Sirius," Joanna said, pulling Decker close and guiding his right hand to her waist, left hand into her hand. "I know it's probably not something you're used to, because you're one of those alpha male types, but maybe let the professional dancer lead, His lip twitched again, but he nodded and allowed her to lead, which was all the better because he had no idea how to dance, so he would have been shit at leading. "You're doing a lot of assuming about me," he murmured as she wove them gracefully around the floor. "That I'm judging people? The alpha male type? What other assumptions have you made?" Her unique blue hazel eyes glittered under all the fairy lights hung throughout the tent, and her lips twisted as she thought. "You're well read?" He didn't say anything or make any facial expression to give away whether she was right or wrong. She was right, though. He read a lot, and he read everything. From the classics to the popular new releases, Kurt Vonnegut and Hemingway to J.K. Rowling and Suzanne Collins. Even though he preferred fiction because it allowed him to get lost in a make-believe world and live 1,000 different lives, he also liked nonfiction, particularly memoirs of adventure seekers and travelers. "Am I right?" she probed. He lifted a shoulder. "Keep going." She beamed. "Okay, you're a foodie, too." He was. He loved to cook. He even took a few cooking classes a few years ago. Mostly ethnic cuisine, but once when he was between missions, he made it his personal mission to perfect a soufflé. So he took a soufflé course, and by the end of it, he'd made 4 perfect ones, 2 savory and 2 sweet. His instructor called Decker her star pupil. "You going to tell me if I'm right or wrong?" she asked. "I want to see what else you assumed about me first." She let out a faint huff of frustration, sending minty air hitting his upper lip. "You're a vagabond. I've never really settled down. Though, full disclosure, Mika told me this, so it's not an assumption. It's a fact. However, you currently have an apartment in Dallas." Her nose wrinkled. "Why Dallas?" He snorted. "It's cheap, and it's a major airport hub. Can fly anywhere real quick." She nodded. "But you, don't want to settle there, do you?" Frowning, he shook his head. "No, too right-wing for me." She swept the back of her hand over her forehead dramatically. "Phew!" He cracked a small smile. "So, was I right? You're a well-read foodie?" Tilting his head slightly, he nodded. "I like books and food." Her grin was jaw-dropping. There was a very good chance Joanna was the most beautiful woman Decker had ever seen. "How old are you?" she asked, abruptly changing the subject. 45. How old are you? 34. He nodded. "And are you still off saving the world from drug lords and fanatical dictators? Or have you decided to hang up your cape and tights and leave crime fighting to the young seals without silver in their hair?" At that, she lifted her hand from his shoulder and swept it through his hair on the side by his temple, where he was indeed sporting several strands of silver. Her fingers in his hair felt incredible. He wanted to grab her hand, kiss her knuckles, and encourage to keep playing with his hair. He could have easily just closed his eyes and allowed her to do it for the rest of the night. "Slowing down," he said, his eyes going wide when the last syllable came out slightly croaked like he was some prepubescent teenager. She giggled and removed her fingers from his hair. "What does that mean?" "Taking fewer missions, being selective and not doing anything nearly as dangerous as I used to. Leaving that shit to the young pups." He cracked a half smile. "The ones without any silver in their hair." I'm easing my way into retirement. Her fingers found their way back into his hair. I think it's sexy. Distinguished. You're like a silver fox. Her gaze pivoted around the room until she found Barnes. He's gone full gray, and he's still hot as hell. Decker snorted. Yeah? She shrugged. Embrace what you've got. Play to your strengths. I'll try to remember that. How long are you here for? He exhaled and frowned, shaking his head. No clue. As long as I want, really. Nate and Mika are heading out on their honeymoon in a couple of days, so I might see if Asher needs a hand around here for a bit. She blew out a breath in a way that accentuated her bottom lip. His gaze fell to it, and the desire to lunge out and bite it was damn near debilitating. Mika asked me if I wanted to sub for her while they're gone. I jumped at the chance to get back into dancing. I'm sure I'll be rusty for the first few days, but I'm excited. Well, a nervous ninny about teaching because I've never taught before. But I'll take anything if it means I can dance again. Her huff of a laugh was humorless. Anything to keep from coming back to Toronto and the job I hate. Even though he knew what she did for work, he asked anyway. What do you do? I sell high-end real estate for my brother's real estate firm. But I actually can't stand it. The clients are so bloody pretentious, I want to clobber them all with the hood ornaments of their overpriced cars. It's also really demanding. Like I can't have a life. I need to be at their beck and call, always. I was on a date, and I had to leave midway through because my client called and wanted me to get them into a viewing of a house because they heard it was hitting the market the next day, and they wanted to see it before it was officially listed. So I had to call the listing agent and get my client a viewing that night at like 10 o'clock. A frisson of something resembling jealousy niggled at the nape of his neck when she mentioned being on a date. That was weird. He had no claim on this woman, and yet the idea of her seeing someone, of her dating, sat awkwardly in his craw. He worked his jaw back and forth and forcefully shoved that weird sensation away. But he could still feel the ghostly touch of the green-eyed monster. Weird. He rarely felt jealousy over anything. Another time I had to sell the tickets I bought to a concert, last minute, because my client wanted to see a certain house in the evening, from sunset through twilight and until every damn star in the sky was out. We were at the house for ages. That sounded goddamn awful to Decker. And he must have been making a face to convey his feelings because Joanna nodded. Yeah, I make that face a lot lately. Does your brother know you're unhappy? He asked. He does, but he says it'll get better. But honestly, I don't think it will. I hate hustling. It is not part of my genetic makeup. Cold calling and having to brown-nose people to get them to choose me as their listing agent or buying agent. It's very cutthroat and competitive. I hate it. I had to deal with enough cutthroat bullshit and drama with girls on the ship when I was dancing. I'm over that. I'm too old for it. He snorted at her mention of being too old. She was 34. She wasn't too old for squat. You laugh, but I was cut from the ships because I was too old to dance. So was Mika. And she glanced behind her at the two women flirting with Riker. So were Melissa and Jillian. We were all sacked as soon as we hit our early 30s. We're geriatric dancers. Might as well just send us to the glue factory. Just a bunch of useless old mares, that's what we are. He snorted again. Then quit. And do what? Anything else. Whatever will make you happy. Her pout was less put on and more real. Dancing makes me happy. It always has. Then find a way to do that again. Ask Mika for a job. Her sigh was weary, and she seemed to deflate in Decker's arms. If only it were that simple. I've already started the application process to get Canadian residency. What's it going to look like if I go, no, I think I want to be a Yank instead? They'll deport me back to my mum post-haste for sure. Something told him it didn't quite work that way, but he'd also never applied for dual citizenship anywhere, or even residency status, so he wasn't entirely sure. Maybe she was right. However, what he did understand was that if something made you consistently miserable, you quit it. Life was too fucking short to do things that made you unhappy. Losing Brendan had drilled that into his head more than anything. It seemed simple enough to him. Quit being a realtor and find a way to dance again, even if that was in Toronto. But then again, he wasn't a dancer. Maybe it wasn't like riding a bike. He'd be happy if he had 2 left feet. But in his case, as soon as the music came on, his limbs turned into tentacles and any sense of rhythm disappeared like a puff of smoke. Somehow the beauty leading him around the dance floor managed to wrangle his tentacles and convert him into a passable dancer. If she let go of him, though, he'd be a spastic squid again in the blink of an eye. Her smile was smaller, but held a wry tilt to it. Maybe you weren't sitting in the corner in judgment. Maybe you're just really observant. Is that it? Maybe. Or maybe I'm judging the shit out of everyone. She pursed her lips and shook her head. I don't think you give a shit enough to care what people think of you, or to judge people. He was stunned silent for a moment on her accurate evaluation of him. Did you major in psychology or something? Or your parents shrinks? Her chuckle warmed him better than the whiskey. No, my dad is in finance and my mom teaches piano and is a seamstress. I'm just observant. I'm not wrong, am I? He shook his head. No, you're not. She leaned back. But something tells me as much as you don't give a shit, you read people really well. So what kind of reading do you get of me? That heat in his belly intensified to an almost uncomfortable warmth. He fought the urge to squirm and cleared his throat. Let's just dance, Determination flickered behind her eyes. No, tell me. I read you and told you. Now it's your turn. Sucking in a deep breath through his nose, he took a tighter hold of her lip and tugged her just a little bit closer. Her eyes flared. Desire lanced through him as her breasts brushed his chest and a sexy pink raced up from her cleavage into her cheeks. She swallowed, and it was all he could do not to lean forward and trace the line of her throat with his tongue. You're hurting, he said softly, and you're masking the hurt with a smile. But with every smile, another crack in your heart forms. It's payment for the visage you're showing the world. You're lost. Much like Mika was before she found a home and a purpose here with Nate. You're pretending the world is just one big, happy, fun-time party so nobody sees how unhappy you really are. And no, I didn't learn this from you telling me you hate your job. I could see it in your eyes the first time I saw you. The masked pain, the fake smile, the excessive laughter. It's all a coping mechanism. A veil. It's one we've all done at some point in our lives. But you've been doing it for a while now, that it's almost second nature. Only it's also fucking exhausting. He swallowed, waiting for the backlash, the slap. One of his skills had always been reading people quickly. He could scan a crowd and within 10 minutes select his target, profile them, and know exactly how to approach them, manipulate them, and get what he needed from them. Usually without any torture or bloodshed. Usually. Her eyes bore into him with an intensity he wasn't prepared for, and he squirmed again, then cleared his throat. But she shook her head to shut him up. Her eyes grew watery with unshed tears, and when she blinked, those tears spilled over and down her cheeks. You're right. I'm lost. I'm sad. I'm in pain. And I've been faking everything. She glanced in the direction of Mika, who was slow dancing with Nate, an enormous, real smile on the bride's face. Because it's not my day, and she doesn't deserve to be saddled with my problems. She found her happiness here, and I'm happy for her. But we can't all marry sexy ranchers and move in next door to our sister. No, we can't. She huffed a sarcastic laugh. I'll figure it out. I always do. His grip tightened on her waist, and it forced her to look up at him. Hey, it's okay to be real with me. She swallowed. Then a hardness caused lines to crease beside her eyes. Want to get out of here?
Chapter 2. Joanna. Decker McKnight was very nice to look at, Joanna fancied him the moment she saw him last night as he arrived at the farmhouse with his twin brother, and the bachelor party headed out for their night of tame debauchery. However, even though Riker and Decker were absolutely identical, she didn't fancy Riker the way she did Decker. Sure, Riker was good-looking, obviously, but he didn't make Joanna tingle when his gaze skidded over her, the way Decker's gaze did. Maybe it was Decker's broodiness, or that he didn't crack a smile when he arrived. He remained stone-faced and mysterious, and Joanna had always been a mystery buff. She'd peppered Mika, Triss, and Hannah for information about him all night, but they had very little to report. Besides the fact that he was a SEAL, like the rest of the guys, had an identical twin brother, was very quiet and a little shy, they knew rather little about him. Joanna then turned to social media, but as Triss and Mika told her, she would find nothing. The guys weren't on social media. Decker McKnight was a ghost. A sexy ghost. A sexy ghost who smelled like musk, danger, and fresh pine, and he was driving her bloody bonkers. He couldn't dance, but that wasn't a deal-breaker for her. What he could do, however, was hold her tight, hold her close, and read her like a fucking book. And that scared her as much as it exhilarated her. She shifted uncomfortably under his unreadable gaze, waiting for his reply to her bold proposition. Desire burned in his amber eyes. He wanted her as badly as she wanted him. But the longer she held eye contact with him, the more she started to see his resolution forming, and he was resolved to turn her down. He hadn't even said anything yet, and she already had her answer. Her chest tightened, and prickles of embarrassment rippled along her arms. She tried to pull out of his embrace. Right. Well, I guess I totally read things wrong. Terribly sorry. My mistake. Call it poor judgment of sad drunk twit. But he didn't let her go. She pushed against his chest, desperate to get away from the humiliation of his rejection. Joanna, he said softly, holding on tighter. Stop. Decker, let me go. No, Joanna. Stop. His voice remained low, but the authority, the command, was so inherent that she stopped, and her back snapped straight before she even had a chance to register what happened. Look at me. Reluctantly, almost like a petulant toddler, she lifted her head, but kept her gaze on his chest. Eyes, too. Humor tinged his tone. He knew she was being defiant. Heat filled her cheeks, and she was sure beads of sweat scattered themselves along her hairline. She certainly had them between her breasts. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to his. Softness met her, and she instantly relaxed. Take a deep breath, he whispered. She did. Good girl. Ooh, he was hitting all the right buttons right now. Her pussy spasmed at his praise. That traitorous bitch. Didn't she know he just turned them down? I never said a word, and you just jumped to conclusions. Why? Because you took forever to answer, and that usually means you're searching for a gentle way to let me down. Or, he postured, I was choosing my words carefully, because I don't want to fuck this up. Fuck this up? What was this? She was just looking for a good time, for a wedding night shag. Nothing more. Anything more made absolutely no sense. She lived in Toronto and Decker lived... Well, his address was in Dallas, but the man was a nomad. He took a deep breath. I don't really do casual. Unlike my brother, who is a walking poster boy for one-night stands. I can't say we're identical in that way. I mean, yes, I've had them, but I prefer not to. Her brows knitted. What was he saying? He wanted to date? She was going to have to agree to be his girlfriend if she wanted to get laid? Fuck that! She could find someone else if that was the case. She made to pull out of his embrace again, but his hold on her remained firm, secure. She hadn't even been paying attention, but somehow he guided them off to the side, and they were now standing almost outside the tent under the stars. Joanna blinked at her surroundings, allowing her eyes to adjust to the dark. Crickets and frogs competed with the music from the speakers. She welcomed the cool air against her sweat-misted skin, and goosebumps quickly broke out along her arms. Decker was in a black, long-sleeve button-up dress shirt and grey slacks that fit him very well, like he'd been sewn into them or something. She swallowed and brought her gaze back up to his. He was staring at her, had probably been staring at her the entire time. So, what does "I don't do casual" mean?
I don't do casual sex. When I'm with a woman, I want it to mean something. I want there to be an emotional connection. I want there to be feelings involved. The promise of something more than just that moment or that night.
I never would have pegged you for a serial monogamist. Do you even have time for relationships? Frowning, but in a sexy and lazy way, he shook his head. So then, do you just not have a lot of sex?
Not anymore. No.
Yeah, it'd been a while for her too. Not for lack of trying, though. Unfortunately, the dating apps had more duds than potential prospects, and when she finally went out on a date with someone she might consider removing her knickers for, a client would call, and she'd have to drag her dry knickers and screaming libido away from her date to fulfill the demands of her client. Fucking clients. They were such cock-blockers.
But quality over quantity,
he said. She shook her head. Maybe she'd had one too many vodka sodas. Her head was getting muddled. So, you want to fuck? You just want me to care about you? His full lips pinned together like he was trying not to laugh.
That'd be a start, but I'd much rather spend the evening getting to know you. I'm already sure Asher won't have a problem with me sticking around to help out here, and you're subbing for Mika, so why rush things? Why can't we get to know each other? Why can't we take it slow?
Maybe because she was drunk, horny, and sad and just wanted a good kick of dopamine and an orgasm. Was that really too much to ask for? Apparently. But the sincerity in his eyes made it tough for her to let go of his shirt. She didn't even realize she had a hold of it until her knuckles began to cramp. She released it and swallowed. I really want to get off. His snort of laughter startled her.
I like your honesty.
I like how you smell. You smell really good. He graced her with a rare, big smile that instantly had a puddle forming in her knickers. God damn, the man was handsome, mysterious and honest, deep and wise beyond the 45 years he claimed to be. This man easily could have lived 1,000 lives based on the wisdom that swelled in the mesmerizing amber of his eyes. And the longer she stared at the wells and speckles of coppers, golds, and bronzes, the more captivated she became. The further under his spell she fell.
Come here,
he said, his voice a low rumble that made her nipples pebble beneath her strapless dress. He maneuvered them around the tent and into the shadows. There were a bunch of hay bales stacked up, and he guided her behind them. Why are these hay bales here? She asked, glancing around to see if anybody was watching them disappear. He grunted and shrugged to say he didn't know, nor did he care. The bales were stacked in a sort of pyramid, so the bottom one stuck out to create somewhat of a bench. He sat down and pulled her onto his lap. The vodka rushed through her bloodstream and into her brain, creating a warm, fuzzy sensation. Did she really just proposition this guy? And did she really just tell him she wanted to get off? She'd never been shy about sex or telling a guy or girl what she wanted, but the fact that she was this brazen with Decker had her feeling a little embarrassed. He shifted her, so she was on one of his thighs, facing sideways while he faced forward. Mika asked her sisters and Joanna to be her bridesmaids, so they were all in different dresses in various but complementing shades of yellow. Joanna found a sexy strapless thing that fell to the floor at a shop in Toronto, and even though it was on the pricier side, it fit her like a dream, so there was barely any hesitation. It pushed up her boobs, making them look better than ever, and it cinched her at the waist, giving her an hourglass shape. Since getting sacked by the ships, she'd put on half a stone. She still worked out and still ate right, but she didn't count calories like a fiend anymore, and she enjoyed the odd dinner of a loaf of good French bread and a round of delicious, expensive cheese. Decker's nose trailed up the side of her neck, inhaling. A shiver raced through her, and she allowed her eyes to flutter shut. She tilted her head to the side so he could have better access. "What do you use when you're by yourself?" he asked, his voice no more than a rough and gritty rumble next to her ear. She shivered again and swallowed as his fingers, starting at her ankle, began to lazily drift up her leg and beneath her dress.
Chapter 3. Decker. Thank God the pounding was on the door of his room and not in his head. Though, to be fair, it had been a long time since Decker had had a decent hangover. With a grumble and a groan and muscles that pinched and pulled as he rolled out of the single-person cot, he double-checked that he had on underwear and padded barefoot across the small bunkhouse room to the door. The room had blackout blinds, thank fuck. But the lights in the hallway were LED and bright as hell. He winced while his pupils painfully adjusted. Riker stood on the other side of the door, a worried expression on his face. "What?" Decker grunted, leaving the door open and sauntering back into his room. He was in nothing but boxers and dog tags. But it was his twin brother, so he could have been in less and still not given a shit. Riker followed him inside and closed the door. "Molly texted me." Even though he wasn't hungover, the effects of overindulging last night still had Decker in its clutches. But hearing Brendan's wife's name sobered him fully. He finished tucking on his white t-shirt and snapped his gaze up to his brother's. What did she say? Riker's haunted expression sent a frisson of unease careening down Decker's spine. "She's got a stalker." Heat flashed through Decker's insides and up his neck. "What?" "I got the text late last night, but was..." Riker's cheeks actually went pink, which was a surprise. "I was indisposed and too drunk to answer. I didn't check my phone until this morning. I feel sick. You'd have been too drunk to drive anyway. Have you called her?" Riker shook his head. "Figure we do it together." Decker nodded, but then stopped his brother when Riker brought out his phone. "All of us." Riker immediately understood and shot off a quick text to their brothers. Decker's phone vibrated on his nightstand. Then there was a flurry of more vibrations from everyone's responses. A quick check of the time said it was 8 in the morning. Not too early, but for the morning after a wedding, it was slightly unreasonable. But this was Molly O'Shea, Brendan's wife. Nobody would be upset at their summons, regardless of the hour. He pulled on a pair of jeans, his socks, and runners, then followed Riker out into the hallway. They made sure they were quiet while passing the rest of the bedrooms in the bunkhouse. A few snores filtered out from behind closed doors, but otherwise, all was quiet. The text said to meet in the tent, since it was away from the houses and RVs enough that they wouldn't wake everyone. Aaron and Colton were already waiting for them, and they could see Rob, Barnes, Asher, Nate, and Cal trudging through the grass with the rising sun behind them. Everyone greeted each other with grunts and tired eyes. They took a seat around a big table. Asher dragged a hand down his face. He had a new baby. Axel was only 5 months old, so he was extra tired. "What's going on with Ma?" Riker glanced down at his phone and rattled off the message. "Hey, Riker, I'm really sorry to do this right now. I know you're all at the wedding. I wish we could be there. But you've always said that I could call or message whenever. Well, I need help. I've gone to the police and filed a restraining order, but it's not working. I'm scared for Sasha and for me. I briefly tried dating her soccer coach. It was great at first, but after a couple of months, he became really possessive and would demand to read my text messages and emails. He found an email from Rob and Skylar thanking us for the twins' birthday presents, and he lost his mind. Accused me of having an affair with Rob. Jesus Christ, Rob muttered. Riker continued. He tried tapping my phone, and I found cameras in the house, even the bathroom and Sasha's room. He's been arrested, but he was released. He won't leave us alone. We came home last night after Sasha's dance recital to find Sasha's cat dead and nailed to the side of the house. Sasha is terrified. The police have been notified again, but I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Please help. You could cut the tension and fury around the table with a knife. It was so thick. If the air had a color, it would be flaming red. Fists bunched on the table. Brows were pinched until they met in the center, and scowls pulled down lips until everyone looked like a really grumpy old cat. Decker cringed at the thought of Sasha's cat and comparing all his brothers to grumpy cats. He should know better. I'll go, Aaron said first. I will go, Riker said with a headshake. You all have families and things to tend to. I've got no new missions on the books, and I've been meaning to check in on them. It's been almost a year. Decker knew why it had been almost a year, but he wasn't sure anyone else knew, so he didn't say anything. Riker lifted his chin at his twin. Deck, you're staying here to help Ash while Nate's gone, right? Decker nodded. So it just makes sense for me to go, Riker said. Decker lifted a brow at his brother, having a wordless conversation with him. Riker understood and responded with a barely noticeable shrug and head tilt. Nailed the cat to the side of the house. This is one sick fucker we're dealing with, Colton murmured, shoving his fingers into his hair and shaking his head. Like what the fuck? I can fly you to Denver, Cal said, offering up his helicopter. And we've got a jet just waiting for us at the airport, Barnes added. You're welcome to it. It'll get you to Jackson Hole in no time. Riker nodded and thanked them both. I need to get there yesterday. Worry rolled off Riker, and Decker clamped his hand on his brother's shoulder and gave it a squeeze. I shot off a text to Molly this morning, and she messaged back to say they positioned a police car and cop in front of her house for now. But she didn't sleep, and Sasha is devastated. No fuck, Nate muttered. Riker pushed a stand. Well, I guess I better go pack. I'll go tell Hannah what's going on, Cal said. Then we just need to drive to my place to get the chopper. I'll ride to the airport with you, Barnes said. He also flew helicopters, but he was probably just coming along for support and to parlay the information about the private jet. You know that all you have to do is send out an SOS text and we'll all be in Jackson Hole within the day, right? Decker said to his brother, standing up as well. I know, Riker acknowledged. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but I know. They filed out of the tent, all of them grim and filled with worry. Molly was family. Sasha was family. Rob was her godfather, but truthfully, they all were her godfathers. They would do anything for that little girl. They would do anything for Molly. Brendan had been the salt of the motherfucking earth, and not a day went by they didn't all think about him. Decker accompanied his brother back to the bunkhouse and stuck by him for support as he packed up his duffel bag. He'd obviously spent the night with at least one woman, but chances are it was two. However, his room was empty, and the bed hadn't been slept in, so he must have had his fun somewhere else. He was packed up and heading to the driveway to meet Cal in under 5 minutes. Neither Riker nor Decker said anything as the gravel crunched beneath their shoes. They didn't need to. Cal was already at his truck. A few brays from the barn and clucks from the chickens penetrated the quiet June morning. Dew hung heavily on tree leaves and clung like crystal Christmas tree ornaments from the blades of grass. It was a beautiful day, but a cloud of worry hung gray and heavy over all their heads. Decker wasn't expecting to see the rest of his brothers in the driveway to see Riker off, but he also wasn't surprised. They were a team. Always would be. Nothing really had to be said, either. No keep us posted, or let us know when you land. All of that was expected and known. They'd been teammates and, more importantly, friends, brothers, for over 20 years. It was second nature to touch base and let your team know you were okay. Decker stepped in and hugged his brother. Give Sasha a squeeze from all of us. He was careful not to say to give Molly a squeeze, too. He knew how his brother felt about Brendan's wife and would actively be avoiding squeezing her, even though he really wanted to. Standing in the driveway, they watched as Cal, Barnes, and Riker drove away. Sick motherfucker needs to be put down is what he needs, Aaron said with an angry grunt as he spun around to head back toward the field where his family slept in the big RV. Well, Riker will do what needs to be done and clean up after himself. Nate was unsuccessful at stifling a big yawn. They all parted ways, heading back toward their families and partners, all except Nate and Asher, who made their way to the barn. Decker followed. Just because we partied all night and want to sleep in doesn't mean the animals feel the same way, Nate said, pulling open the side door to the barn only to be greeted by a cacophony of brays and whinnies from horses. He turned to Decker. Guess you need to learn the ropes, huh? Put me in, Coach, Decker said with a crooked smile. And they did. He mucked stalls, fed animals, collected eggs, took horses out to pasture, dodged goats who wanted to pee on him, and barely managed to avoid being sat on by the attention whore horse, Macklin. It was 10 o'clock, and the farm was finally starting to rouse by the time he and the Harris brothers headed into the main house, smelling like hay, goat piss, because they couldn't avoid it all, and manure. His belly rumbled with the need for a good breakfast, and a tear nearly crept out of the corner of his eye when they entered the old farmhouse, and the sizzle of bacon met his ears at the same time the familiar scent wafted up his nostrils. The house teemed with life. All the young sisters were awake, as were their spouses and parents. Everyone had congregated in the living room and kitchen. Tired eyes and messy bedheads greeted him from every side. A military man himself, Pasha's husband Heath, instantly knew something was wrong, and he lifted his chin at Decker and the Harris brothers. Rayma's husband and Una's partner were brothers, and both were Canadian cops, so they tuned into the vibe right away as well. Decker, Asher, and Nate tried to dismiss them, but it was to no avail, and within a minute they were relaying everything to the three men in one of the spare bedrooms down the hall. Get me his name, Heath said. My brother is a hacker. He'll have everything on this guy pulled up in an hour, down to how big his shits were when he was still in diapers. How was that even possible? Jordan, Rayma's husband, asked, giving Heath a strange look. You know what I mean, Heath muttered, rolling his dark blue eyes. Decker nodded and punched in a request for the guy's name to Molly. He didn't want to bother Riker and go through one more channel when he could just get the information from the source. Molly messaged back almost instantly. Adrian Michael Huber. Then she sent a picture, too. Decker sent all of this to Heath, who shot it off to his brother. Chase is on it, Heath said a moment later, his gaze fierce with conviction. This fucker can't hide. Decker and the Harris brothers grunted, and they all filed back out of the bedroom and into the house, and chaos. Even with the throng of people and roar or noise, it was like he had an uncanny sixth sense about Joanna or something, because he felt her before he saw her. She was standing in the kitchen with Mika and Pasha, laughing as she pushed scrambled eggs around in a big pan on the stove. But she must have felt his eyes on her, because when she turned around, a beautiful pink flooded her cheeks. Her smile was sweet, almost demure, but not quite. He knew she was staying in the old farmhouse, but for some reason he didn't expect to see her that morning. Maybe because after their moment on the hay bales, she'd bounced right back out onto the dance floor and continued to drink, well past Decker heading to bed. She looked bright-eyed and headache-free, though, and more beautiful than he remembered. After a buffet-style breakfast where everyone just sat where they could with a plate full of greasy breakfast goodness, the crowd dispersed. Some guests were heading home right away, while others took their time. Kids wanted horse and pony rides. Then there was feeding the goats, the pigs, and cows on the to-do list for the younger generation. And, of course, taking down the tent and putting away all the tables and chairs. Besides the slightly trampled grass, by the time they were done, you'd never really guessed that there had been a big wedding with loads of dancing less than 24 hours ago. It just looked like a big field again. Decker said goodbye to his brothers as Aaron, Colton, and Rob all drove away with their families. Barnes' wife, Briar, stuck around until Barnes and Cal returned. Then they headed back to Cal's with Hannah to stay there until their jet returned from Jackson Hole. They said they had nowhere to be, so they were just going to hang out. Oh, to be billionaires without a care in the world. Slowly, the numbers dwindled. The Young sisters had a tense relationship with their parents, so Mr. and Mrs. Young took their leave to the airport by mid-afternoon. Eventually, it was just ranch hands, the Young sisters and their spouses and children, though only Pasha and Tris had kids, Joanna and Decker. It was easier to stay busy and avoid each other when there were so many people to come between them, but now that there were fewer people, it felt like they were constantly in each other's orbit. Not that he was complaining, but she seemed to almost be avoiding him. It was 4 o'clock, and Decker felt the pull of solitude. He lived alone. He often worked alone now. He was used to being on his own, and he didn't mind his own company. Not that crowds necessarily bothered him, but he'd been around them for the last 3 days. He needed a breather. So he wandered out to the field where several horses lazily stood under the shade of a gigantic oak and munched on grass. He sprawled out on his back, hands behind his head, and stared up at the clouds. He didn't realize that Macklin was one of the horses in the field, though, since Macklin wasn't with the other 3 when Decker first wandered out there. But the big baby of a grown-ass horse came trotting over within 5 minutes of Decker laying down and tried to sit his big horse's ass in Decker's lap. "You are not a Shih Tzu," Decker said with a grunt, trying to shove the brute off him before he shattered Decker's pelvis. "Macklin, get off!" But it was useless. The horse tipped his head back and leaned into Decker even more. It must have looked ridiculous. A 1,000-pound horse sitting like a dog on Decker's lap. If he wasn't in so much pain, he'd laugh. Someone else laughed, though. And it was a beautiful laugh. A throaty, feminine chuckle that made his dick twitch. "Macklin, get off him, you silly goose," Joanna said. Macklin must have preferred Joanna to Decker, because as soon as she spoke, the horse scrambled to get up and go to her, where she was walking toward them in the field. Decker groaned and stretched his legs. "Bastard might have broken my femur." "Who? This big baby? Never. He's as gentle as a day-old lamb." She stroked Macklin's face as he slowly walked beside her, nuzzling her. "Aren't you, darling? You're just a big love bug. Wouldn't hurt a fly, let alone a big scary seal." Macklin made a horse noise to agree with her. 1,000-pound wolf in sheep's clothing, that one. Decker stood up, admiring the way her lacy white dress with the small, flowy sleeves hugged her body, accentuating her curves. Like last night, she let her long blonde curls drift down her back naturally. But unlike last night, she wasn't wearing any makeup, and that's when he noticed all the freckles across her cheeks and chin. He wanted to kiss each and every one of them. She and Macklin met him in the shade of the oak tree. He was sure he was just seeing things, but he could have sworn Macklin gave him some side-eye. Like he was saying, "She's my woman, don't come any closer." She batted long, but not fake, pretty eyelashes at him. "How are you feeling today?" "Fine," he replied, scratching the back of his neck. "You?" "My head was a little sore this morning, but I popped a paracetamol and was fine within an hour." He nodded. God damn it, she was pretty. Sun-kissed skin, rosy cheeks, unique blue hazel eyes. And he couldn't forget the sound she made when he got her off. "So, about last night," she whispered, nibbling on her bottom lip. "I was sad. Sad, but happy. Happy for my friend, of course, but sad for myself. You know, about my job and stuff. But I never meant to—" More pink infused her cheeks. "I hope I didn't." A smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. He tilted his head a little. She was flustered, and he enjoyed it. "I didn't like—" He lifted his brows, waiting. She nodded and glanced away, still absent-mindedly petting Macklin. Good. I didn't think you would, but You know, our mind plays tricks on us when we've been drinking. It can, yes. She was back to nibbling on her lip. He wanted to bite that lip himself. Taste it again. It tasted fucking delicious last night, but he wasn't anywhere near satisfied. Do you remember what else I said to you? He asked. You told me to quit my job? I did, yeah. Anything else? She twisted those pouty lips in thought. To be honest, the night is a bit of a blur. A great blur. But after we, on the hay bales, things start to get fuzzy. Right. Well, I told you I'd like to get to know you sober. She snapped her fingers. Right, and that you don't do one-night stands. That you like to shag people you care about and have a connection with. That's right. That's really old school. Is it? His brows hiked up a little, and amusement prickled in his chest. It feels like it is. Sex is just sex these days. A way to get your rocks off without risking carpal tunnel or waking up your roommate because your vibrator is too loud. Decker snorted. I suppose it is for some. But not you? Not anymore. She gave him a skeptical, one-brow-lifted look. You're for real, aren't you? You legit want to get to know me before we shag? That would be preferred, yes. And you're staying here until Nate and Mika get back from their honeymoon? That was the plan, yes. To help Asher on the ranch. And I'm staying to run the dance studio for Mika. I'm aware of that, yes. So, we'll both be here on the ranch for 2 weeks. That is my understanding, yes. Were you this calm and annoying last night? She asked. His lip twitched. Probably. I wasn't drunk. Am I annoying? Yes, but in an endearing way. Kind of. She turned to Macklin. This bloke wants to get to know me before he shags me. Have you ever heard anything more absurd? Macklin made a snuffle sound like he was agreeing with her. How about we go for a walk this evening? Decker offered. Down to the creek, perhaps. She eyed him suspiciously for a moment through a narrowed gaze, but then finally nodded. Yeah, okay. Great. I'll come find you around 7:30. Yeah. Okay. They stood there in the field, staring at each other for a while. He was relaxed. Joanna, not so much. You, want to sit and stare at the clouds with me? He finally asked, settling back down into the grass, then reclining to his back. Macklin made a noise of piqued interest, like he was considering sitting on Decker again, but then he nuzzled Joanna instead. She was quiet for a moment. He closed his eyes since the sun had shifted and was no longer being blocked by a cloud. But his seal ears kicked in, and he heard her shuffle through the long grass toward him and, bringing the sweet floral scent of perhaps it was her shampoo or conditioner, she reclined down in the grass beside him, leaving a half-a-person width between them. Do you do this often? She asked. Lay down and do nothing? Sometimes, he replied, not bothering to open his eyes. When I need to calm my mind. The clap-clap of horse hooves on the ground growing nearer forced him to pry one eye open. Macklin was standing at their feet, staring down at them. What do you want? Decker asked him. The big brown horse stood there for another moment, weighing his options, whatever they were. Then, like the idiot that he was, who thought he was a lapdog and not a behemoth quadruped with metal shoes, he flopped down to his side and shimmied his way between them, shoving them further apart. He was like a toddler in his parents' bed, kicking his father in the back until dear old Dad finally got the hint and went to sleep in the guest room. Joanna laughed, but Decker was more than a little pissed. What the fuck, buddy? Macklin lifted his head and gave Decker the stink eye. He just wants to snuggle, Joanna said, stroking the horse's neck. He knows exactly what he's doing. Notice how his feet are pointed toward me? That's not a mistake. She giggled again, and his ire eased slightly. Reaching across the horse's wide neck, she beckoned. Grab my hand. He did, and together they laced fingers over top Macklin's neck as he tried to avoid getting a hoof in the nuts. I think you have competition, she said, a giggle still in her voice. I think so. He gave her fingers a gentle squeeze. Good thing this dumbass can't fit in the bed. Her laugh was like music, and it was a tune he knew he could easily listen to on repeat for the rest of his life. Maybe he was getting a little ahead of himself. But something told him Joanna Fernsby was more than just someone he was going to get to know for 2 weeks. She was someone he was going to get to know for 2 weeks and then keep for a lifetime. He just had to figure out a way to help her see it too.
Chapter 4. Joanna. Not even a finger bang this time. Kisses? Yes, plenty of them, and they were all great. But other than some hand-holding, a butt squeeze, and lots of delicious kisses, Joanna went to bed that night without another orgasm from Decker. He truly wanted to get to know her before they went any further, and that was so different from any other guy she'd met that she was still struggling to accept that he was the real deal. Mika, of course, dogged her for information on their date. She was shipping Joanna and Decker pretty hard. "You guys would be so great together," she said as the two of them sat at the kitchen table drinking wine later that night. Her sisters had all dispersed to their cabins, RVs, and houses for the night, so it was just Mika and Joanna. Nate was in the barn doing something horsey, as Mika put it, while Asher was at home with Triss and their son on the other side of the property. "But it'd be temporary," Joanna said, taking a sip of the icy rosé Mika had poured them. "That's what I thought about Nate and me. But here I am, with a great life, doing what I love, and doing who I love. A super sexy cowboy." She paused for a moment, like she was waiting for something. Nothing happened. "What the heck?" "Never mind," she said. "I mean rancher." Joanna shook the confusion from her head. "Yeah, but I'm kind of in the process of getting permanent residency in Canada. I have a job that you hate, and you can always be like, 'Nah, bruh, I'm gonna bounce and go shag a seal in the good old US of A. Laters.'" "What slang is that? And please, never use it again." Mika snickered. "All I'm saying is, life's too damn short to not do something you love." Her lips twisted wryly. "I mean, I would love for you to move here and teach dance with me. It's a lot doing it all myself. I mean, I love it, don't get me wrong, but having another teacher would be so great. We could offer more classes, sub for each other, bounce choreography ideas off each other. Think of the recitals we could put on together. They would be spectacular." Her gold-brown eyes glittered with excitement. "It all sounds so idyllic, but—" Mika gave her an almost impatient look. "But what? Where would I live? You want a house? I can have a prefab cabin with plumbing and electricity plunked on the edge of the field by the end of the week. Just say the word. I have connections, yo." "Please stop with the gangster talk." Mika stuck her tongue out cheekily before sipping her wine. "Take these 2 weeks as a trial run. See if you could work here and teach. If not, no harm, no foul. But if you fall in love with the life, the job—" "Decker," she said his name as a cough into her fist. "Then even better. He's only staying long enough to help out Asher while you and Nate are gone. Doesn't mean he can't stay longer." She shrugged. "I know for a fact he doesn't want to settle down in Dallas, but that he is ready to settle down. Asher and Nate are trying to convince him to consider settling here. Maybe you could jump on that train too." "Just saying." "You're just saying an awful lot. Can I help it if I want one of my best friends here?" Joanna rolled her eyes. "I suppose not. Think about it. Be open. That's all." Joanna sipped her wine. She'd think about it. That's probably all she'd be able to think about now that Mika had planted the seed. A life here with Decker. The wide open spaces, the fresh air, the animals, the endless possibilities. It seemed unobtainable, and yet, as she held his hand earlier that day in the field, overtop the obnoxious horse's neck, she had the fleeting thought that she could easily do things like that every day for the rest of her life, lay under the clouds and just do nothing. At least, she could if it was with Decker. The next afternoon, Mika and Nate left for their 2-week honeymoon to Croatia. The rest of the young sisters and their families left as well. The ranch felt positively empty once it was just Triss, Asher, Decker, and Joanna, even though there were loads of ranch hands wandering around and oodles of animals. With the absence of so much energy, it was both refreshing and lonely. But Joanna didn't really have time to dwell on the lonely part of things because Tuesday brought forth an endless stream of young, eager dancers ready to twirl, shimmy, plie, and mambo. School was out for the summer, so from 9 in the morning until 7 at night, she was teaching. Every age and skill level, too. Preschoolers to teenagers. Those without an ounce of rhythm, and those who could do a better grand jeté than she could. Mika had the schedule well organized, but packed. Joanna was positively knackered, but also elated by the time she schlepped her way into the farmhouse that night. She expected to find it empty and dark, but it wasn't. Food sat on the table. Soft music played in the background, and someone putted in the kitchen making noise. Triss and Asha had the ranch dog Bruno with them, but Bruno obviously couldn't make dinner, so was it one of the ranch hands? Nope. She'd recognized that broad back and fine ass anywhere, even if she only just started ogling it a few days ago. Decker spun around, a tea towel thrown over one shoulder as he carried a cast-iron pan of sautéed green beans over to the table that was set for 2. A roast chicken sat already carved on the table, along with a green salad and roasted potatoes. "How was your first day of teaching dance?" he asked, setting the frying pan down onto a hot pad. She blinked at him, unable to speak. He blanched. "Did you lose your voice having to talk all day?" She shook her head. "What is all this?" "Dinner?" he replied, adding an upward inflection of his own since it was clear as day what it was. "Yes, but—" He rolled his eyes. "Go wash your hands, Joanna. I made you dinner because you worked hard all day. We're also staying in this house together, so what kind of roommate would I be if you came home and I was eating and didn't make enough for you?" But she was speechless, so she just did as she was told and went to the bathroom to wash her hands, returning a moment later. "Sit," he ordered. "Wine?" Sure." He poured her a glass of the same rosé that she and Mika enjoyed the night before. Then he ditched the tea towel and pulled out a seat for himself. "I asked Mika if you were allergic to anything, and she said you weren't, that you like food as long as you're not the one cooking it." Mika was right about that. Joanna didn't like cooking, and she wasn't very good at it. Everything on the table looked and smelled delicious. "Well, dig in," he said, spearing a couple of roast potatoes and putting them on his plate. Still very bewildered, but famished, she dished up her plate, taking a little bit of everything. Then she added more of everything because she could. "Tell me about the first day," he prompted, bringing a shiny green bean to his lips and taking a bite. He wasn't even using a fork. He was like some kind of sexy savage, and she was here for it. "It went rather well, I think. Great kids, all eager, all excited." He nodded, and she could tell that he was really listening to her, really absorbing what she was saying. The preschoolers were wild, but they had great energy. I just played a lot of games with them, and they seemed to like it. The older ones are very serious and dedicated. I remember what it was like to be so focused, to live and breathe dance. He nodded and chewed. "What did you get up to today?" she asked, cutting into a potato which steamed when she opened it up. "Helped Asher fix some holes in the fence near the back corner of the field. Cleaned out some stalls. Had to catch a chicken that got injured before the others pecked it to death. That idiot goat Fumble got out, so we had to chase that bastard almost down the entire driveway before we caught him. Took 6 of us. Fucker just needs to be shot. He's more trouble than he's worth." She snickered at that. It was well known that Fumble the goat was an obnoxious escape artist. Mika had actually found him a few miles down the road one time. "But he's so cute," she teased. "So is Goat Stew." They ate and chatted like an old married couple. It was remarkably easy and wonderful. He topped up her wine, cleared her plate, and the man had even baked cookies. Honest-to-God, double chocolate chip cookies. And they were still hot, too. "You're like a robot or something, right? Or an alien?" she asked, catching a chocolatey crumb that nearly fell into her lap when she took a bite of her second cookie. "You're not real." A confused look splashed across his face. "Why do you say that?" "Because you're like bloody perfect. You want to get to know me before we shag. You cook. You're considerate. You actually fucking listen to me when I talk. You ask questions. You gave me the best goddamn finger bang of my life." He snorted. "And you're like chill as fuck. Does anything ruffle your feathers?" His throat moved on a swallow, and he casually sipped his water, then set down the drinking glass. He was choosing his words carefully, something she noticed he did a lot, unlike her, who spoke almost always before the thought even made its way to her brain. "I'm not sure I have too many feathers left to ruffle," he said softly. "Most of them have been plucked, and they just never grew back." "What the hell does that mean? You're a bald bird?" He snorted again and smiled. "No. It means I just don't have any fucks left to give. Life is so short. Why not spend the days we have doing good, doing what we like and making an impact? I've done a lot of things in my life that should have gotten me killed. Then my brother, not Riker, but a brother in arms, Brendan, took his own life because he couldn't deal with all the things we saw, all the things we'd been through. His wife Molly lost a husband that day. His daughter Sasha, who was just a baby, lost her father that day. And we all lost a friend. After that, I never took a single moment for granted. I never took a single person I met for granted. If there was something I wanted to do, I did it. I didn't put it off until tomorrow because none of us are guaranteed to have a tomorrow. I cook because I like food. It makes me happy. It makes me happy to cook for others and see them enjoy my food, to enjoy the time and energy I poured into creating something for them. And I listen to you when you speak because I find you interesting and I want to hear what you have to say. Chapter 5. Joanna. Lather, rinse, repeat. Get increasingly sexually frustrated in the process. They were on day 5 of no sex, just talking, kissing, and hand-holding, and even though Joanna enjoyed getting to know Decker, she was nearly at her wit's end with him too. "Are you, wanking it every night in order to not go insane?" she finally asked him on Saturday morning as they danced around each other with practiced ease in the kitchen. She always had oatmeal and fruit for breakfast. Meanwhile, he was more of an eggs and bacon guy. He liked his coffee strong and black, and she took her English breakfast tea with a splash of milk and a teaspoon of honey. "Yes," he said without hesitation. Her jaw dropped open. "What? I didn't know we were allowed to on this celibate get-to-know-each-other thing." "When did I ever tell you that you couldn't get yourself off? You're telling me you haven't been?" "No! I thought that was part of the whole deal. Sexual deprivation, so when we finally do it, it's explosive." "If I did that, I'd last 10 seconds when we finally do it." He leaned back against the counter, amusement dancing in his eyes and a small smile tugging up one corner of his mouth. She approached him with her eyes narrowed to thin slits. They were chest to chest. His smile grew. Her eyes narrowed even more. "So, you've literally been wanking every night?" "Sometimes twice." "Fuck!" He shrugged, then leaned forward and kissed her nose. "I never told you that you couldn't." Growling, she peeled away from him. Then she glanced at the clock on the stove. It was 8:15. Her first class didn't start until 9. She only taught until 1 o'clock today. After that, she and Decker were going to go for a hike. "I have time," she said with an affirmative nod at nobody in particular. "Time for what?" He called after her as she headed down the hallway toward her room, her strides purposeful and big.
Every time Decker thought about their morning, he'd smile, then get a boner. Watching Joanna get herself off was one of the hottest things he'd ever seen in his fucking life. Then putting her toy in his mouth and watching her reaction just made the whole thing even better. But now that he'd gotten a taste of her, he was like a fucking addict and wanted more. They'd spent the last 5 days really getting to know each other. He knew she was frustrated, but at the same time, he also knew she really appreciated his effort. She wasn't just some random fuck. She was special. She was someone he wanted a connection with. But maybe it was time. They were going for a hike when she finished teaching. He packed them a picnic, and Asher told him about a great little lake in the mountains. It was only a 20-minute drive from the ranch, then a 3-mile hike in. Not many people knew about it, since there were no trails into the lake, but after flying over it in Cal's helicopter, Asher and Nate had covertly marked a trail using a technique that only their SEAL team knew. So Decker would have no problem following the markers, but Joe Blow, the civilian, might. He packed blankets and towels, condoms and lube, and anything else they might need for their date. Like a good Boy Scout turned Navy SEAL, you can never be too prepared. She was back inside the farmhouse shortly after 1 o'clock and ready to go by 1:40. They borrowed one of the many trucks on the ranch and hit the road with the sun in the rearview mirror and blue sky ahead of them. He reached for her hand across the bench seat. This morning was fun. She blinked, then pink filled her cheeks. "It was. But after what you did with my toy, it just piled the tension right back on." He snorted. He loved her honesty. "I've had an erection all fucking day," he said blandly. "Made mucking stalls a little uncomfortable." She snickered. "Serves you right." He squeezed her fingers, then returned his hand to the wheel. "Do you hike much?" Her derisive snort told him she did not. Luckily, Asher said the hike wasn't difficult, it just involved a bit of bushwhacking. They rode the rest of the way to the parking spot in companionable silence. It wasn't awkward. She stared happily out the window, and he enjoyed just sitting beside her in the truck. Parking the truck in the shade, and where he knew it would stay shady, he climbed out. She did the same. Slinging the backpack over his back, he took a quick moment to admire the way the sun on her face made the blue in her eyes glitter. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and she'd probably have a few more cute freckles on her cheeks and shoulders after today. Just more places for him to kiss. "Shall we go?" he asked, hitting the fob to lock the truck. She nodded and waited for him to find the first marker. It was barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Sticks bent in a very particular way, then wedged into the V of 2 trees that connected at the root. It pointed northwest, so he headed northwest. "How do you know to go this way?" she asked, twigs cracking under her running shoes as she skipped to keep up with him. Asher and Nate marked the trail. "I know their marks." "Cool." She was wearing navy cropped yoga pants and a hot pink tank top of a similar workout material. Her blonde curls were piled on top of her head in a sexy, messy topknot, but a few wisps fell down without care to frame her face. He was in shorts and a t-shirt. "Do you think the lake will be warm enough for swimming?" "Doubt it, but we can try anyway." "I didn't bring a bathing suit." He craned his head around and cracked a half smirk. "Neither did I." She bit her bottom lip, but the smile broke through. "Oh." Dead leaves crunched under their shoes and birds sung high in the canopy. It was a wonderful soundtrack to what was shaping up to be a picturesque day. Although the breeze was on the cooler side back at the ranch, the sun hung high overhead with benign warmth, and they were shrouded in the forest, safe from the wind. Sweat quickly broke out on his forehead, but Decker didn't mind. He stopped when they reached the next marker and pointed. See? It was the same as before. Sticks bent and angled in the V of two trees. They pointed more due north than the last marker. "We need to go more north than west now." Her brows knitted together. "That's the marker. You're sure?" He smiled. "Dead sure. It's what we used all the time when we needed to let each other know where we were without revealing our location to the enemy." She blew out a breath and plopped her hands on her hips. "Okay. I'd rather not get lost, though. Triss said there are bears in the woods." "There are, but we'll be fine. I have bear spray." "You don't need that. You just need to outrun me." He barked out a laugh at her unexpected response. Then, just because it had been a while since he touched her, he bent low and scooped her up caveman style, so her head hung behind him over the backpack. "No, I just carry you like this." Then he started to run. "See? I won't let you get eaten by a bear, Joanna." She giggled in that sweet way he adored and smacked his shoulder. "Put me down, Decker." "Nope, can't risk you getting eaten by a bear. This is safer." He slowed his roll to a quick-paced walk. "This is actually really uncomfortable over the backpack. Please put me down." "Oh, shit." He stopped and set her on her feet. She was still smiling, and her cheeks glowed a sexy pink. "Sorry." Lifting one shoulder in a playful shrug, she leaned over and bumped him. "Just don't outrun me if we come across a bear, okay?" "Deal." They continued on, locating the markers with ease and adjusting their course. "This is actually a brilliant marking system," she said, having found the next one before Decker even did. She beamed up at him when she adjusted their course according to the sticks, taking the lead. He didn't mind one bit. It gave him an excuse to stare at her ass in those yoga pants. She located the next several markers, which impressed the shit out of him. Then they were at the lake. "Oh my, this is lovely," she said in awe as they stood on top of a small bluff overlooking the crystal-clear lake surrounded by towering evergreens. "There's even a little island in the middle." "Asher said there's a small beach to the left here," Decker said, heading downward. She followed, and within 5 minutes they were down at a small rocky beach with the sun in front of them and the water glittering like a million diamonds. He welcomed the warm breeze across the V of sweat along the neckline of his t-shirt. He wasted no time peeling it over his head and hanging it on a tree branch to dry. Then he spun around to face her and began unloading the backpack, but stopped when he caught her standing there with her mouth open. "What?" he asked, hiding a smirk by dipping his head to open the backpack. "That stomach seems painted on. That's not real. It can't be. Nobody in real life has a stomach like that. It's photoshopped." He snorted, and his smirk tugged harder at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, I paint these lines on every morning. You'll see them wash off when I get in the water. Nothing but a beer belly, really. It's all an illusion." He pulled a plaid picnic blanket out of the backpack and spread it over the rocks, then patted his stomach. She glared at him playfully and shook her head. Then she peeled off her tank top to reveal a black sports bra. Next came her yoga pants. In seconds, she was in nothing but a black thong and a black sports bra, and his dick pressed against the zipper of his cargo shorts. "I paint my tits on, too," she said with a snicker to her voice, making him realize he'd stopped searching in the backpack and was just standing there, slack-jawed and staring at her. He cleared his throat and resumed pulling their picnic out of the backpack. She reclined on the blanket and closed her eyes. She was like the cover of a fucking magazine, all sprawled out on the blanket. One leg was bent at the knee, her arms were casually thrown up by her head, and a small, playful smile curled her full lips. She was the best kind of distraction. "I suppose I should ask if you need some help," she said, rolling over to her side and propping her head up on one hand. That just made her tits squish together, and he nearly swallowed his fucking tongue. "You're helping plenty just laying there looking like that," he said, bringing out more containers of food and setting them down. Once he was finished, he joined her on the blanket. She sat up and watched him open the bottle of sparkling wine he'd wrapped in a few cryopack ice packs, the kind you use for injuries. They were more flexible, and he wrapped a few of them around the bottle and then rolled it all in a towel. The wine was still chilled. The cork deploying made a loud echo across the lake. He found plastic champagne flutes in the kitchen cupboard in the farmhouse, so even though they weren't as fancy, they were far more practical. He poured her a healthy portion and handed it to her. She waited for him to pour himself some, then turned to him with a big smile. "What shall we toast to?" He'd spoken more words with this woman in the past week than he had with anyone in his life, besides maybe his brother. But for once, he was speechless. "How about to making connections?" she offered, a coy smile tipping her lips. Heat flickered in his belly, and he nodded, knocking his plastic flute against hers. To making connections. They sipped their beverages in silence, staring out at the translucent lake. There was no awkwardness with Joanna, no second-guessing in his head that she was quiet because she was secretly brooding and angry with him. The woman didn't play head games, and he appreciated the fuck out of that. With a deep sigh he felt right to his marrow, she finished her wine and set the flute down on the rocks before turning to face him again. "Thank you for this. I really needed it." "Tough week?" She smiled more brightly than the warm sun overhead, but shook her head. "Not at all. This week was magical. I honestly thought I was going to be absolute rubbish as a dance teacher. I've never taught anyone anything in my life, let alone children. But it was brilliant. They were brilliant. Sweet and clever, fun, and so eager to learn and improve. Moves they couldn't achieve on Tuesday, they were masters at today. And the smiles of pride on their faces brought so much warmth to my heart and tears to my eyes. She swallowed and blinked a few times as the emotion took hold of her. "I loved it. Every minute of it." She swept a tear away, but he knew it was a tear of joy, of feeling fulfilled. She was back doing what she loved, which was dancing. Now I know why Mika is so bloody happy all the time, and why she turned down moving to Toronto to sell real estate to snobby rich people. She chuckled through what was clearly a tight throat. Then she glanced around where they were. She's living in paradise with a dream job, dream guy, and cheeky goats. She's living the dream. Envy seeped into her tone. Why can't you live the dream? Her chuckle turned a little bitter. You make it sound so easy. But my life, my job, they're in Toronto. I'm applying for residency. My brother is sponsoring me. I don't have any family here. Frowning, he grabbed his phone from the pocket of his pants. He had service. He shot off a quick text. She watched him, but he held his phone at an angle he knew she wouldn't be able to see who he was texting or what. Anyway, maybe I can find a job as a dance teacher in Toronto. She pushed her bottom lip out further and blew out a breath. I can't go back to real estate. I just can't. My brother will be sad, but he'll understand. He nodded, but kept his thoughts to himself. His phone vibrated a minute later with a response from who he texted, and he grinned. He already knew what the response would be, but he wanted confirmation first. I'm pretty sure Mika would hire you, he said, opening up the containers of cheeses, crackers, meats, olives, and cut-up fruit. I'm sure she would too. She said as much, but it's not that simple. There's a whole getting sponsored thing. I don't really know how it works to get permanent residency here in the States. I'd have to look into it. I just asked her if she'd hire you, and she texted back with, "Fuck yes, I would hire her yesterday," in all caps. He showed her his phone. Her brows wrinkled when she read the text. Then she popped an olive into her mouth. Okay. As for the residency thing, heat wormed its way into his cheeks, and his belly prickled with unease. But that only lasted for half a second before an overwhelming sense of calm took over. We could always get married. Her blue-hazel eyes went wider than saucers. Are you mental? Now it was his turn for his brows to bunch. No. They do a psych evaluation before you're allowed to join any kind of special ops military organization. I passed with flying colors. She scoffed. Not what I mean, and you know it. You've got to be mad proposing to someone you've only known for... She did some quick mental math. 8 days. Yes, but in those 8 days we've accomplished a lot. Gotten to know each other? You know all about my upbringing. That I'm from Missouri, have one brother who you've met, and a younger sister. My parents are still together. Mom is a retired kindergarten teacher. Dad was a principal and is now retired. Now my sister and her husband are the exact same, kindergarten teacher and principal in St. Louis. He ran his right index finger down the front of his right shin, the one he turned into a fish skeleton tattoo. You know how I got this scar? The worry in her eyes slowly faded. He pointed to all the other scars on his arms and hands. You know how I got each and every one of these. Then he reached for her left hand and spun it around gently so it was face up, tracing his finger over the white scar that ran diagonally across her palm. And I know how you got this scar, and many of the other ones, too. Her lips pressed tightly together. With his free hand, he tucked a loose strand of blonde hair behind her ear, then cupped the shell of her ear. I know that you hated your ears growing up because the top part sticks out just a little. Someone said you had pixie ears, so for 3 years you taped them to the side of your head every night hoping they'd change. Then you leaned forward and kissed the ear he was touching, then moved over and kissed the other. I happen to think your ears are perfect. Pink crept into her cheeks, muting the freckles a little. We know each other, Joanna. We've connected on nearly every level. I've never felt more comfortable with someone, besides maybe my brother, in my entire life. Hell, he threw his head back and shook it. I've never talked this much with anyone in my entire life. You make me want to talk. A small smile tickled the corner of her mouth. He didn't let go of her hand, but rather laced his fingers through hers and squeezed. I'm not saying it needs to happen tomorrow. Her eyes went a little buggy. But I want you to know that the offer is on the table. If it means getting you your dream life and your dream job faster, then I'll help any way I can. Including marrying me. Including marrying you. Then what? After I get my permanent residency, we get divorced? He frowned. Well, I'd hope not. I quite like you and hope that maybe you like me back, and we could actually give the whole marriage thing an honest attempt. But if you want a divorce after your permanent residency status is approved, then okay. She swallowed and stared at their intertwined hands. An employer can sponsor me too, she whispered. I know that. I read up on it. A family member or employer, or you can file yourself, but the fastest and most effective way is to marry a U.S. citizen. She glanced back up at him. You're really serious? Yeah, I am. I care about you. I can easily see myself falling in love with you if I'm not already on the way there. You're funny and smart, ambitious and blunt. I thought I was content with my life, but meeting you made me realize that I've secretly been wanting more. Like, family? Worry filled her eyes. Because I don't know if I want kids. I like kids, some, but I'm not sure I'm cut out to be a mum. He shook his head dismissively. Don't care one way or another. Kids are cool. Some, she snorted. But they're not a make-or-break deal for me. Okay, so hypothetically, I say yes to marrying you. I get my permanent residency and start working here for Mika full-time. Will we just be long distance? Or will this be a marriage of convenience, on paper only? Your apartment is in Dallas, with boxes that I haven't opened in the 6 years I've rented the place. I have no art on the walls and I pay month to month. I could be out of there in 30 days. And living where? He glanced around. Here? Colorado? With you? She untangled their fingers and glanced out toward the lake. I'm sorry. She pressed her hand to her forehead. This is just a lot to absorb. You're offering to marry me? Yes. She spun around, irritation in her eyes. Decker, we haven't even shagged yet. I could be the worst shag of your life, and here you are prepared to saddle yourself to this horse, and you've never even taken her for a bloody ride. He knew he shouldn't find her comparing herself to a horse. Again, funny, but he did. He tried to keep himself from smiling. It wasn't easy, and he failed. Her brows pinned. It's not funny. It is a little funny. You just compared yourself to a horse again. She rolled her pretty eyes. You know what I mean. I'm assuming we'd have sex before we got as far as getting married. I mean, He leaned over and grabbed the strip of condoms from the backpack. Epilogue. Decker. 1 year later. With the sun hanging low in the sky, illuminating his wife from behind as she raced toward him on the quad, Decker's pulse picked up tempo. She looked like a golden-haired, redneck angel. Kind of. She wasn't a redneck, per se, but with her hair in a ponytail, his flannel shirt way too big for her, keeping her warm, and a pair of jeans and boots, she looked like she belonged on this ranch almost more than he did. You'd never know that 20 minutes ago Joanna wore leotards, ballet shoes, and had her hair up in a tight and perfect bun, teaching pirouettes to children all day. Her smile made his heart soar, and he climbed down off the ladder from where he'd been cleaning the gutters to meet her as she pulled up and turned off the engine. "Howdy," she said, trying for a southern drawl. It came out funny with her English accent. "Howdy," he echoed. He ate up the distance between them and wrapped his arms around her. "How was your day?" "Wonderful. Megan finally perfected her fouette. I cried, she cried, we all cried." He rubbed her back. Joanna was such a wonderful teacher. The students responded incredibly to her. She put her heart and soul into helping them achieve their dreams. Megan was an older student in her final year of high school and was actually awarded a dance scholarship. She was Joanna and Mika's star pupil. So he knew Megan's achievement would make Joanna emotional. She loved her students with her whole heart. She loved life and Decker with her whole heart. "How about you? How was your day?" she asked. "Cleaned the gutters, just finishing up, made dinner. You know." They both snorted. That wasn't just it. He'd been up before Joanna and down at the ranch to help Asher and Nate with the animals. Then he spent part of the afternoon helping Asher mend sections of the fence, and finally he came home, worked on dinner, and while that cooked, he cleaned out the gutters. There was always something to do on the ranch. Whether it was on their prefab home on one edge of the field, or the farmhouse, or Trish and Asher's place, something always needed cleaning, mending, or goat-proofing. Her belly rumbled, and she stepped out of his embrace. "Well, I'm starving. Roast chicken and veg sound good? If I don't have to cook it, I'm not sure either of us would eat it if you did." He held the door open for her, but she stopped on the threshold and swatted his chest while also giving him a dirty look. "I've gotten better, haven't I?" "You're good at so many other things," he teased, going to the sink to wash his hands. Joanna headed to the bathroom to do the same, then she returned to their open-concept kitchen and living room. He caught her eye as he brought over the steaming roasted veggies to the table. "Like blowjobs. You're great at blowjobs. Just play to your strengths." She stuck her tongue out at him as she yanked the cork out of the half-full wine bottle on the table. She poured them each a glass. "So Tris told me some big news today." "Yeah? Asher told me some big news today, too." Her eyes twinkled as they met his. "I like being an auntie." "You're very good at it." "I know." She took a sip of her wine and shrugged. "I play to my strengths." He brought over the rest of the dinner, and they pulled their chairs out to sit down. "You're okay not having kids?" she asked, eyeing him over the rim of her glass. He started to dish up the chicken onto his plate. 100%. I like being an uncle to Axel, and I'll enjoy being an uncle to this next baby. Plus, all the other guys have kids, too, that we're aunt and uncle to. We've got a lot of nieces and nephews." "We sure do. Not in short supply of those, that's for sure. Those kids are going to need their cool, childless aunt and uncle to run to when their parents get all annoying and weird with rules. I mean, Aaron is going to be such a helicopter parent." "Is going to be? He already is. The man is a bloody Black Hawk." He snorted another laugh. She spoke the truth. "I'm so fulfilled with our life as it is," he said, hoping to reassure her that he didn't need children to make his life complete. It was already so complete and completely wonderful with just her. Her lips twisted. Was she getting baby fever now that Tris was expecting again? Did she want kids? He was 47 years old. He wasn't against the idea of having kids, but he'd be an old dad. He certainly wouldn't get to meet his grandchildren. "Mitch Hadley's dog Jinx had puppies," she said, biting her lip in that way that made his dick twitch. "What about maybe getting a dog?" A dog? Oh, he was so on board with a dog. He would have been on board with kids, too, if that was what made Joanna happy, but he was totally on board with a dog. His nod nearly made his head disconnect from his neck. "Absolutely. I'll text Mitch after dinner and ask when we can come by and see them. Jinx is such a good-tempered dog." Joanna beamed. "Good, because I already put down a deposit. We're going to see them after dinner tonight." He tossed his head back and chuckled. Better a deposit on a dog than on a baby. Then his brows knitted. "Not even sure how you do that." "You would make the deposit," she clarified, spearing a broccoli floret with her fork. "Inside me. But I think our life is pretty good as it is. We just need a furry, four-legged baby." "Absolutely." Her blue hazel eyes went wide, and she leaned over to the side to pull something out of the back pocket of her jeans. "Oh, I almost forgot. Look what came in the mail today." The envelope was already opened, so it was easy to pull out the letter. She turned it around to show him the side with writing. "It's official. I am a permanent resident of the United States of America." He let his utensils clatter to his plate, dropped his gaze, and shook his head. "Well, I guess that's that, isn't it? I'll file for divorce in the morning." She pretended to swat him with the paper. "Like hell you will, you lunatic. You're not getting rid of me for anything. I'm madly in love with you, and you are stuck with me. I'm your wife for life." Then she stuck out her tongue. "How do you like those apples?" He stood up abruptly enough that his chair fell down behind him. It only took him 2 strides to be around their small table, where he hoisted her up out of her chair and slung her over his shoulder caveman style. "I'll show you how I like those apples, and how I like to eat those apples." Then he took his wife upstairs to their bedroom, where he peeled her out of her clothes and reminded her just how lucky he was to call her his. Because she was. Forever.
We hope you enjoyed listening to Found Forever, written by Whitley Cox, performed in dual narration by Andy Eloise and Sean Masters, produced by Pinup Audio. Text copyright 2025 by Whitley Cox. Production copyright 2025 by Whitley Cox. All rights reserved.